One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question, where we highlight executive leaders in college athletics. Our guest today is Sherryta Freeman. Sherryta is currently the Director of Athletics at Lafayette College. Greetings, Sherryta.
Greetings.
Now, you've been there in that role for a little over 4 months, and you've obviously been in college athletics administration for 16 years, going on 17 years. And what I know you for, what I think you're known for, is gathering a bunch of information, whatever process you use to gather the information, analyzing the information, and then making a strategic decision that's best for whatever organization you're working at. I'm sure you've done that at a number of the different places where you've worked.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. So being there, 4 months, you come in, you're the leader of the athletics department there. So you have to, I'd imagine, have a process to analyze and review everything internally to understand the lay of the land on campus in terms of athletics to community as a new athletics director. Can you tell us a little bit about the process you used or are using to do your internal evaluation there at Lafayette?
Sure. Definitely a pretty significant task, but really, really important nonetheless. Upon my arrival, and probably even before that, because I did spend a significant amount of time prior to my arrival talking to the deputy athletics director, to the vice president that I report to, and so even prior to my arrival, I really focused on understanding what this institution is about. But upon my arrival, I focused on getting to know my staff, coaches as well as administrators, but also faculty and staff on campus. I couldn't begin to evaluate the athletic program until I understood the culture of the department and the institution. Operationally, we do things a little bit differently in many ways. It's a smaller school in terms of reporting lines for athletic staff members, how our budget is structured, so we do some things differently. So spending time getting to know procedure was necessary. And so I spent some time understanding and talking to people and saying, how do we do this? How can we improve this process? How can we be more efficient? How can we save money? So asking a lot of questions. And also from there, I met with every single head coach one-on-one. I met with senior staff members within athletics, but then also across campus. I met with vice presidents. I met with different operational areas. And this helped me formulate a picture for how we could improve and looking at, okay, here's how we do things and understanding how we do it, why we do it, and who's involved. And then how can we improve upon that process, but also not saying, oh my gosh, that's not the right way to do it, we need to do it this way, but saying, I think maybe we could think about doing it this way, and asking for that person's opinion and saying, what do you think about how I'm processing this information? And that has worked out pretty well in terms of being able to evaluate what we're doing. And then, in terms of just gathering information and understanding how we compare to our peers, the Patriot League, as our conference, I think is certainly a great way to be able to look at, how can we be more competitive, because that's ultimately the goal, is how can we be more competitive within the Patriot League, and how can we do things in a way that, we're keeping up and also being better than our peers. And so looking at benchmarking data to understand, where we are with our budgets, where we are with compensation, where we are with all different areas was important for me to undertake that process, whether it be formally or just talking to the people who have worked here for any number of years and understanding where we could improve was really important. So understanding who we are, and where we're going was certainly an important process.
I do have a question relative to part of the process. When you're talking to, a coach of sport A and a coach of sport B, do you ask similar questions so you can process the information the same, or do you take each conversation as its own life, its own animal, and its own body and go from there? How do you analyze that part?
Yeah, I think a combination of the two. I mean, I think every program is different. Every head coach is different. Their priorities and approach to their leadership is different. And so understanding that, I've booked a certain amount of time for each head coach, but those conversations could go in any number of directions. And, a large part of those conversations was getting to know the person, getting to know their style, getting to know what drives them, how are their teams doing, what are their student athletes like. So there were some general questions that I was asking, but then asking an open-ended question, how can I best help you, took us in really, really a lot of different directions because, I think, our programs are in different stages. And so, where one coach would say, I really could use some guidance in recruiting and admissions, another coach would say, I really could use some guidance on how we improve our budget to be able to have a more competitive salary for X, Y, and Z. And so those conversations took a lot of different directions, but I think ultimately they were positive conversations because early on I really got a sense of what's important to that coach. And so as we're formulating the strategy and the vision going forward, I knew the specifics of what was needed.
Right. And so what I know about, a great leader can obviously solve problems that are presented to him or her. And something you just said there, talking to the coaches say we need some help in this area, or we can use some support in this area. And I imagine you gather that information and then you actually probably, the areas they're talking about were probably on your list of people to go talk to in your first 4 or 5 months there. And you slowly but surely come up with ways that could possibly solve that, but let's not make that decision yet. Do you have a notebook full of information? Like, how do you make mental notes, right? Of all the various aspects and how things can tie together before you start making decisions on things. How do you gather the information?
Yeah, I have a lot of lists. I have a lot of, notes from different meetings. I like to write things down. I'm not big on the, iPad and typing yet. I'm still like pen to paper. And so when I have conversations with someone, I leave that conversation with action items. And those action items are, people that I need to follow up with to ask a particular question or a decision that I need to make and then get back to that person. And then I try to follow up on those things. So that's how I've handled all of those varying levels of conversations and follow-up opportunities that I've had over time. And then some things obviously get assigned out to other folks and say, hey, this came up in my conversation, but this really falls within your job description. And so can you handle this question or this issue and get back to the coach and let me know what's going on? So any combinations of me putting together, action items, but sometimes those action items are just delegating it to someone else.
Right. And, we say delegate, but let's just call it empower, right? So now this person feels like they have the authority to do whatever you said, give them authority to do. So sometimes it helps people out when you do that.
Absolutely.
So now you have, notebooks full of notes, right? List, you have conversations, and you have all this information you have, right? And I mentioned before, you're known for being able to synthesize information and make strategic decisions. How do or will, right? You synthesize all the data and all the information you've gathered to give it all a fair and balanced analysis that will help you as you, and I'm sure it's probably going to be pretty soon here, come up with your vision and strategic plan for the future of Lafayette Athletics.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm going to share with you what the vision for Lafayette Athletics is, because I think that's important to understand what our priorities are and to be able to articulate how we approach them. So the first is competitive excellence. The second is academic excellence. The third is positive student-athlete experiences. The fourth is campus integration. And the fifth is integrity. And as we look at the strategy going forward, we will focus on these 5 areas. So what decisions do we need to make? What changes need to be implemented? And how can we better resource the athletics department in order to improve upon these 5 areas? I think for us, from the competitive excellence standpoint, the goal was to establish a championship winning culture, and resources will be needed in order to improve upon that particular area. The good part from an academic standpoint is, in looking at the strategy going forward, academically our students are doing fantastic. We have been outstanding performers in the classroom. We're recruiting strong students. So that's not an area that we need to look at many changes for the strategic plan because we're already doing a great job of that. I think for a positive student-athlete experience, where our coaches, I think, have created great environments and cultures for our student-athletes to excel, I think we also need to be thinking about all those other holistic development, student-athlete well-being pieces that maybe we haven't been able to implement as much of. The sports psychology program, mental health, nutrition, and being able to give them those pieces of support in ways that other institutions at the Division I level have been able to do. So we'll be focusing on that. From a campus integration standpoint, I think we've done particularly well in terms of not outshining the academic prowess of the institution, but I think we can certainly be more integrated in what's happening in the community and being present and having our student athletes be more involved and our coaches and staff more involved. So that's something we've certainly committed to doing. And then the last part, I think, from an integrity standpoint, as I've said to our staff and to anyone who I've articulated the vision to, is that from an integrity standpoint, we just want to do things the right way. We don't want to cut corners. We want to be the best at what we do, and we want to do it the right way. And so when we're looking at the strategy and the vision and synthesizing all of this information, it's how do we hit the mark on all of these areas so that overall we're achieving our goals. And so if you think about all the lists and all the conversations, I'm putting things into buckets. I'm putting them, okay, how does this help from a competitive excellence? How does this help from a positive student-athlete experience? And if it's not checking off one of those boxes, it doesn't mean we don't address it, but it may not be a priority. And that's how we've approached this. But the one thing that I will say is that I'm not doing it by myself.
Yeah, exactly.
You need a team of people, so our senior staff is very much involved in these conversations. I've done this exercise where I've given everyone stickies and saying, looking at, where can we be? What can we accomplish in 5 years? What does that look like? And having people just write down their thoughts, stream of consciousness, just whatever comes to mind. But then having a conversation, okay, what did you write down and why did you write that down? And putting them into categories so that it's not just my vision, but it becomes the vision of the department. And so they've heard comments from coaches, or they've been around long enough to know, what are some of the hot button issues that we need to address. And so I feel like in going through this process, it's not just my vision, but it's our vision for Lafayette Athletics. And I feel really good about where we're headed in terms of being able to release the vision for athletics, but not only just talking about it, but how we hope to get there in the coming weeks and months to everyone so that they can fully understand what we're doing.
Right. And coming in, I guess, with those points you mentioned, I guess it does make it I wouldn't say easier, but it helps to organize information. How does it fit against these values that we've established will be our values moving forward here in Lafayette Athletics?
Exactly.
Okay, and my final question here, what I know about good leadership is a process of, I call it expectation with evaluation, right? So a good leader has the ability to make sure the people they lead understand the responsibilities inherent to their positions, but also know how they'll be evaluated at those responsibilities. And at what point does that come up in your plan or in you've been there for 4 months? Do you sit down with everybody and say, okay, you know what you're supposed to do, or let me explain what you're supposed to do so we're both on the same page. And then here's how I will evaluate it, or the sports administrator you will evaluate what you do and how you're doing your role. Where are you in that process for almost everybody, I guess, in the department?
Wow. Well, it's interesting you asked that question because it's been something we've been working on the last couple of weeks. So going into the new academic year, which started July 1, obviously there's a lot of performance evaluation and goal-setting exercises that are happening across campus and within our department as well. And so what we've done is take the vision, the 5 parts, and we've set goals and expectations for staff members, for coaches within those areas. And so by the end of the year, we want to be able to say, how has this person contributed to the overall vision for athletics? How have they performed from a competitive standpoint? How have they set an atmosphere of academic excellence? And so going down the line and really holding people accountable to the things that we stress that are important. And so our evaluation tool has been adjusted to reflect the direction of our department, and I think it will help people understand what our priorities are, how they fit into those goals, and then what we're going to hold them accountable for, which is so important when you have a large staff and when you have people who are coming in, and I'm a new leader, and it's like, well, what does she want? And, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? And I wanted to make sure that that was very clear. And so, again, presented the information, senior staff, we walked through it, we tweaked things, we made adjustments based on some of their feedback, but ultimately we came back with a document that we are rolling out across the entire department, and it's been received really well. The coaches have been excited about it because they understand what's expected of them, and it's clear as day. Here's what the department needs from me. And so I'm really, really excited about the new year for the Leopards, and really excited to continue to lead this department.
Well, Sherryta, this has been excellent information, and I think Lafayette College hired the perfect person to help them move into the direction they want to move in there on campus and in athletics and within that conference. And I really appreciate you joining us here on One Question.
Thank you for having me, Ty.
That was Sherryta Freeman. She's the director of athletics at Lafayette College, and she's been there for a little over 4 months. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.